morning, class. My name is Stephanie Enciso, and today my topic is about eating meat. Specifically, it is my claim today that a meat-based diet has substantial harmful consequences. Specifically, I will also be talking about beef and poultry, and a term that I wanted to clarify is factory farms. So factory farms are modeled after the 18th century Industrial Revolution era factories where mass production was the focus. And instead of textile materials, now we have a focus on mass production of meat that we eat today. This is now modern day farming as we know it. Another technical term that I will be clarifying is COFs, which stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. And the Department of Agriculture defines this as a concentrated operation where animal manure or wastewater is being discharged into a stream or waterway. In this speech, I will be discussing first that eating meat from factory farms is dangerous to human health, and second, that modern day animal agriculture pollutes the earth significantly. First, eating meat from factory farms is dangerous to human health. Regulations or lack thereof allow for contamination of food. An example of this is cross-contamination. So for poultry farmers, they use a method called the water immersion cooling system, which means that after the birds have been electrocuted and cut open, they're forced into a tank where they're communally held in their own fecal matter, and it's absorbed into the skin and tissue of the animal. The nonprofit National Fisheries Institute reported that an 8% limit of this water was allowed to be absorbed by the animal. And in 1997, a court decision actually upped that up to 11%. So now the current law is that 11% of fecal retention is allowed to be consumed by us who eat poultry. Furthermore, human diseases being untreatable are linked to unsanitary conditions in these factory farms. The investigative book called Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer pointed out that humans in a year ingest 3 million pounds of antibiotics. For livestock, it is 17.8 million pounds of it. We're stuffing animals with these antibiotics and products, and we're doing it to get a full stomach, but we're not thinking about what is going inside the animal itself. The Union of Concerned Scientists, which is made up of scientists and engineers from MIT, as well as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, reported that chemically enhanced antibiotics being used in animals is the dominant source of enhanced antibiotics and antibiotic resistance among foodborne pathogens. The CDC stresses that antibiotic resistance is a really urgent threat for us, and it allows for illnesses that were once treatable to become untreatable and for diseases to spread. What this means for us as consumers is that we're eating animals with diseases who have been modified to be resistant and to be spread easily. The effect of this is that people continue being put at risk when eating meat. Just last year in 2017, the USDA reported over 20 million pounds of meat products to be recalled. Now that I have discussed how animal meat-based diet affects human health, I will discuss how it affects the earth significantly. Animal agriculture pollutes the earth. In a New York Times article, Beena Venkataraman describes how ocean dead zones affect the environment. So ocean dead zones are seafloors where oxygen has been depleted to the point where it cannot sustain marine life. And this is due to crop fertilizers and runoff by the COFs that we earlier defined. COFs and the improper handling of them leads to water quality impairment, contamination, and fish kills according to the Environmental Protection Agency. Just recently, Hurricane Florence destroyed our environment, and an NPR report reported that there have been over 3 million confirmed deaths for pigs and chickens in North Carolina, and it was due to them being housed in crowded conditions to the point where they couldn't escape from the flooding, and now the cleanup is going to affect the water as well. Next, animal agriculture destroys natural environments like rainforests. In a report for NASA, Rebecca Lindsay demonstrated how rainforests are being cut down in order for pastures for cattle farming. According to her report, the deforestation of natural environments could be argued as essential for meeting human needs. However, the consequences are social conflict, extinctions of plants and animals, as well as climate change, not just locally, but globally as well. And then NASA also directly reported the biggest cause of tropical deforestation is the conversion to pasture to raise livestock for industrial-scale cattle ranching. In conclusion, supporting and participating in a meat-based diet deteriorates not only our human health, but also the earth and its pollution. Being aware of the harmful consequences of a meat-based diet will promote a conversation for future sustainable farming methods, as well as the overall endurance for our humans here on Earth. Thank you.
meat-based diet, I felt a little bit lost.
Sorry. Wait, am I on? Yeah.
No, I didn't.
No, he's just doing the
peer review. Yeah. You can rewatch it. It's not lost enough.
you should have a paper that says peer review, you're doing reviews in it, and then the other one is a reputation.
All right, Stephanie, the proposition's clear. There's a clear statement of what the supporting points are going to be. There are only two of them. The controversy on this has to do with how significant this particular issue is. The closest that you get to identifying some significant points has to do with the at the end when you're talking about the impact that it has on the rainforest being measurable. And then there was one other section where you were talking about the impact on the oceans. And I think that those would be the things that suggest that there is something here that is controversial. Because there's not much controversy that there are, bad things that happen, as they say, when the crap hits the fan, that's not particularly a desirable thing. But the question is, how dangerous is it? How is it a greater risk than other things that we're doing, or is it greater now than we've had before? Is it unreasonable risk? Is it something that we have to worry about more? The health issues mostly talk about cross-contamination and the consumption of antibiotics. The contamination issue, I think you kind of give us a negative visualization of it, although there's not really any quantification about how many illnesses or effects there have been on human beings. There's a statistic about how much more fecal matter we can have in the stuff that is, connected to our food. That doesn't sound particularly appealing. However, since 1997, and we've gone up to that, have we had more problems, health issues, that sort of thing? We don't really have any data that suggests that there is some health risk. It's just mostly the kind of disgusting nature of it that is being used here. The argument about the antibiotics, though, I think is the one that is the potentially stronger argument, that there is, because of the antibiotics that are being used in the farming procedures there, that has an effect on potential strains of illnesses that we can't resist, can't fight against, that kind of thing. There's the theory behind that is explained. The risk is not particularly quantified, and we don't have anything that's practical that illustrates it. We're going to have to rely on the so-called experts who say that this is going on. But we're back. I imagine that the people who are responding to this are going to point out, well, we've been doing this for 30 years or 20 years, whatever it is, and this is what's going on, and we haven't had any of these kinds of incidents. Every time somebody says boo about this kind of issue concerning antibiotics, we discovered that we have answers to those things. Or conversely, you could talk about some of those outbreaks where we've had this kind of thing. That would have maybe been a good thing to add to the speech right there. The issue about the impact on the environment, like I said before, the two things that you've got are the dead zones in the ocean and the deforestation issue. In terms of how big an impact that has on the environment, I'm not quite clear. That there are a lot of ocean dead zones. How much of the ocean is dead? How dangerous is this? That's a little bit vague. That a spill could result in a dead zone probably is not going to be something that you can refute. But that the dead zone then is something that is significant, important, can't be overcome, that's, I think, where there needs to be a little bit more development. I thought it was a little confusing because with the deforestation issue, you're talking about concentrated animal feeding operations, which makes it sound like we're trying to use less and less space, and then the deforestation sounds like we're using more and more space. So it sounds almost counterintuitive that this is happening, and I'm not sure that they are automatically canceling each other out, but I could see why it would lead to a little bit of confusion. So maybe more explanation about how much land is being lost and why it's important that that land not be lost for biodiversity or whatever it is that is the problem from losing that land. I thought you had a very solid summary. I think everything's presented well. There's good information. You cite the sources for the most part. They're credible sources. I just think that there are bits and pieces of places where stuff needs to be filled in a little bit more. All right, thank you.